Hello and welcome to this guide for using the new water simulation in Cities Skylines 2. This video is intended for map makers and will mostly be in the editor. If you're looking for a deep dive on the new water simulation or how to convert an existing save to use the new water simulation, check out my last video linked in the description. Okay, let's jump into the editor. There are now only two types of water in the editor. There is the sea level, which you can change with a slider, and constant level water source. If you're creating a new map in the editor, you'll automatically be using the new water system. However, if you are editing a map that was created before the update, it will be utilizing the previous water system. If you're working on a map that was created before the water simulation update with version 1.3.6, there is a way to quickly convert your map to the new water simulation. However, you will likely experience flooding or drought and need to fix some issues. You'll probably need to put a lot of work in if you have lots of sources or complicated rivers. Keep in mind that this conversion is irreversible, so I recommend saving a backup of your map with the old water system just in case. Now, if you open a map in the editor created before the water update, and then you open the water panel, you can see a button in the top right corner that says Convert to New Water Sources. This button automatically changes the sources on the map to the new system and removes any unnecessary ones, such as seawater sources. So let's do that now. Here, there's 2 seawater sources there. And let's hit the button and see those disappeared. Now all of these constant level water sources, they have remained. And then these border river sources from before, they are now constant level water sources. Now they don't always work out that well, so let's have a look. Let's unpause here. And then let's turn it back to daytime and speed up the simulation. Now you can see here we're experiencing flooding here, and this one is also experiencing flooding. This one is fine. Now what you can do is you can adjust these by just adjust the height. So the height didn't convert properly there, and it'll bring it down. You'll see the evaporation has now speeded up or sped up since the update, and it quickly fixes the problem there. So a quick note that old water sources will still work on maps and saves with them. However, it is recommended to use the new ones if you can. Now I think it's fair to assume that not all custom maps will be updated. And I wouldn't not use a map just because it doesn't use the new water simulation. As I explained in my last video, I don't think that the benefits of the new water system are so great. Or at least it's not yet clear why it's much better. So I don't think it's fair to the creators of all those maps if they either update them or they are not played. Now since the update, we can see that the water panel has a few different sections and it looks a little bit different. It's mainly been simplified. So we can see there's the water settings section and the water simulation speed section here. We'll get to the constant level water sources in a minute, but here you can see we have a slider for the sea level. We can bring it up and down, and that white line that you're seeing is the sea level that will occur. You can see actually in the world map it is automatically going up and down already. So I think our water level here is around 100, and you can actually go in here and you can enter an exact value if you like, and I'll put it to 100. So sources are no longer required for seawater, and the white contour line on the map indicates the sea level water height and automatically matches the value shown in the menu. Seawater is filled from the map's edges, so only areas below sea level and connected to the sea will become filled with water. Show you what that means in a moment. Let's maybe pick a point here. Let's go like that, and then okay, so now we have this ring here that is at an elevation higher than the sea level, and we have an area in the middle that is below. So we'll see what happens when we fill this in. Let's go to water, go to water simulation, and let's do it at 1 speed, and that way you can see how quickly it now fills. If you're familiar with how quickly it filled in the previous version, it was much slower, so this is a big improvement. And if I were to kick this up to 3 speed, it would go a little bit faster, and then if I were to go 64 times, it's almost instant. It's much better. So you can see this area in the middle here didn't fill in, so you can now more easily create maps with areas with land that are actually below sea level. And as you can see, the sea level is now even right at the border. There's no weird glitchiness happening, and the sea level is even everywhere on the map, which is very nice. So below our sea level slider here, we have a toggle for simulate backdrop water. So you can now have water simulation outside the playable area. Let's do that now. Let's put a source maybe out here somewhere in the mountains and see what happens. Now you see, I didn't actually toggle it, so it put it in the closest corner to where I was that is within the buildable area. Put it right on the boundary. So let's go ahead and delete that. What we need to do is we need to toggle simulate backdrop water, and then we can add an item, make it rather large, then we'll run the simulation, and you can see we now have water that is working in the world map. It is flowing, and this will not, I tested this in the last video, it will not flow into the playable area. So you can have water that flows out of the playable area into the world map, but not the other way around. So that'll prevent any unwanted flooding. So this is useful when you want to have something like a lake that is on the boundary between the playable area and the backdrop. Previously that was not possible, so now you have something that was like a lake that would bound the two sides. You're seeing it here because that's just the sea level right now, as you can see again by the white line. And if we can see our river here is coming along nicely. Next in our water menu is a drop-down menu for water material configuration. And this is a list of some really interesting things. These are all new. Some of these things were already available in the water features mod, but some of this stuff is kind of new and I think is very interesting. We'll see how it gets applied. Now, the first two confused me at first, and I'll explain why. They seem very self-explanatory. They're sea flow direction and sea flow strength. So you can see as soon as I start adjusting it, it brings up the water overlay to show me direction of the water. And right now I can see it's all flowing in as the water does flow in from the edge of the map for the sea. Now if I try and change the direction, you can see it's actually not doing anything, and the sea flow strength as well is not doing anything. And this is a known issue and is going to, I hope, be resolved soon. However, you can actually see when you change the sea flow direction. It's a little tricky to tell, but visually it does make a difference. So while it's not actually changing anything in the simulation in terms of its actual flow, so say it was to carry away pollution, it wouldn't be doing it very quickly here. You can tell that it's actually changing it visually. So I guess if that's all you care about, you can play around with this, but until it gets fixed, I don't think there's much point in changing this. Next, we have foam amount and fade distance. These all just change it visually again. So let's turn off our overlay. So foam, you can add foam. Kind of adds it everywhere. And then there's the foam fade distance. There's ripples. You can change the waves, be big or small, make a nice, very calm lake. Little strength. Make it almost like glass. There's waves, and then there's also lake waves. So the absorption distance, you can see it's kind of how much light is coming through the water. Then we have the refraction color. You can actually change the color of the water. More so with the scattering color. So if you were to tweak these a little bit, you could get some Mediterranean blues or glacial teals or Caribbean crystal or a lower Mississippi brown. So there's a lot you can do with this visual, although it doesn't really do anything in the simulation. There's also caustics, which is kind of interesting. So if we up the absorption distance, this blue is very blue. Don't mind that. There's no way to actually reset these, by the way, so I guess just be careful while doing it. Maybe save before playing with them, because it doesn't seem there's a way to reset. Then you can play with the caustics, which is something that is how the water works at the shoreline and how light comes through. The caustic intensity. And then we have wave minimum depth. If we have our wave multiplier on, we can change our wave minimum depth. So you can see it's moving closer to the shore. Now I know this looks horrendous, but I'm pushing it to the extremes so you can actually understand what is happening here. As when it refers to depth here, it's talking about the shoreline. Now, I'd like to point out that I haven't actually tested publishing a map with these material configurations, so I don't know how they save to the file. I would assume it's similar to how a climate saves to a file, so I'm hoping we don't have any issues with that. I'm guessing not, but we'll see. Now, below this menu, there are 3 buttons. One is to reset water. So here you can see all the seawater went away, and it's now going to refill. I can also press apply sea level. That if I change the sea level, let's maybe change it. Oh, I should turn on my topography so you can see where my sea level is. So it's up here now. And now if I actually lower that sea level, it takes a while for it to go back to where it should, but if I go apply sea level, it just happens very quickly. It's great. These new features are awesome. And then the last one is show water source names, and I find this super useful. Okay, I just added a water source here so that we can go show water source names, and you can see it's listed there. Okay, so I've loaded here into Caribou Valley. And you can see if I go to my water sources, I've actually named a bunch. So this one's the Fraser River, and this one is the Quesnel River, and you can turn this on and off. It is a toggle. I don't know why it doesn't have a checkbox like the others. It is a toggle, but I find it very useful. It is useful if you organize your sources, and if they're just the regular numbered ones, it's also very useful, so you can easily find them in the list if you need to. So yeah, It makes navigation convenience just so much easier. And the last thing that you'll find here in the menu is the water simulation speed, which you've already seen in action, and if you're familiar with the editor, you've used it before. It speeds up the simulation. In my experience, 128 actually just kind of stops. It doesn't really work. 64 times is the ideal for me with free speed. That is the fastest I can get the water to go. If I hit 128, nothing really happens. So I don't know if that's different for anyone else. Perhaps that's a CPU bound issue. So I guess you might experience different things depending on the performance of your PC. Otherwise, nothing is really new here with the water simulation speed. Okay, now for constant level water sources. Like the name implies, the constant level water source provides water within a radius to a specific height. Now, I always recommend pausing the game before placing any of these sources to prevent any unwanted flooding. So I'm just going to add one to show you what I mean. So if we put this here, so the water will flow outwards from that area to the desired height. If I click on the source there, I can rename it. So I can call this my lake. You can see it shows up there. I can see the position of it. I can locate it. So if I'm away from it, I can go locate. I can change the height of it with this slider, or I can grab the edges of it to change it up and down. I prefer to do this because I can actually more it's easier to fine-tune this. It's easier to fine-tune the elevation to which it'll go to, and you see this blue edge that comes. You see this blue area is what will fill in. It's kind of like the white contour line to set the sea level. Setting the radius makes the area that fills in with water bigger. So if you actually had two lakes next to each other and both of them were within the circle, both of them would fill up. So I prefer to do smaller ones that just kind of fit in their designated area. Now the height that you see is actually just the height of the water from the level, not its elevation. So this would be 20 meters, it'll fill to 20 meters above this point, and I can drop it down in there. It'll fill to 20 meters above this point, not to an absolute elevation. There is a pollution here that you can add. I think this is working now. I saw someone flood a map that had a polluted source on it, and yeah, it was not a good time. So be careful with this one. Only use it if you really mean to for specific situations, maybe where you're trying to create some sort of lore around the polluted area. As you saw before, this button here is to add an item. This adds a source basically in the middle of your screen, and you can then edit it from there. You can move them up and down in the list, so you can organize them easily. There is a copy button, or duplicate rather, and it doesn't really duplicate it. So for example, if I have this source with a height of 50 and a radius of 100, let's put that there, and then I'm gonna go over here. When I hit duplicate, yeah, so it is using the default values of 10 and 30. Maybe this is just a feature that's not properly working yet. Now, I can delete each of these individually just by pressing the little delete button here, which is nice. And you might want to watch out for this button here, clear. I would recommend almost never touching this. I've accidentally pressed it before, thinking that it was the delete button, and I was sadly mistaken when I found out that it does this. It gets rid of all your sources, and it doesn't even ask you if you are sure, if you want to do that. They're just all gone. I know people that have lost hours of work to this, so yeah, do not press that button unless you absolutely mean to. Now, when you place a source, there are now a few colors for sources depending on where they are placed. So as you saw me already adding items, I was getting these blue sources, and they appear blue if they are entirely within the playable area. We also have magenta sources that are for when they are entirely within the backdrop, or 50% of it is within the backdrop. And then we have yellow sources that are on the border, placed between the playable area and the backdrop, or also known as the world map. So, and I didn't show before, but these sources now quickly fill up areas. So if we press play here, we're on 3 speed and 1 times water simulation, and you can see it's quickly filling up this source here. If I go 64 times, it'll almost instantly fill it up to that elevation that I wanted to, and I can adjust it from there. If I feel like it's too low, I can fill it up more. If I feel like it's too high, I can drop it down, and it actually even drains fairly quickly as well, which is nice. If I make a big mistake and I go outside of this area, I can drop it down again, and everything again evaporates pretty quick. If you find it's not evaporating pretty quick, then just go reset water, and it'll get rid of all of that unwanted flooding and fill those areas back up again. Okay, so this next part is new. I kind of already talked about it, but water is now simulated from sources in the backdrop or world map, but you do need to toggle that simulate backdrop water button. So the toggle only affects constant level water sources. The sea level is already set. So water sources, as I showed, are magenta when they're placed in the backdrop, and they fill areas similar to the playable area, except they can reach places that the sea cannot. So previously we could not make lakes that were in the world map, and can. So if you saw my other video on the water simulation, you would have seen that water can now flow from the playable area to the backdrop. So let's do that by simulating backdrop water, and then let's add source. So you can see that water is now flowing from the playable area into the backdrop. And let's watch this as it goes. And one of the concerns would be, well, what if I have some terrain or something that comes back into the playable area and creates flooding that I don't want? Well, that can't happen. Water does not come back into the playable area from the backdrop. Now, one thing you may notice when using this water in the backdrop is that it has a lower resolution, and it doesn't fill areas as well as it does in the playable area. This is a good example here of how the water in the backdrop doesn't fill spaces that are very small, so it would be hard to make small ponds or canals or rivers or creeks in the world map. And here you are seeing that last type of water source I was talking about, which is the yellow one, the border water source, where over 50% of the source is within the playable area, and it could also be called an edge source. And these edge sources will flow water into both the playable area and into the backdrop. You can see there I made it a little bigger so that it could reach into the backdrop. Oh, and I accidentally deleted it. Yeah, so that's another thing to be careful of. Right-clicking on a source actually deletes it. Now I've gone into a new game here so that we can have a look at fish abundance. That is something that you'll want to consider when using different water depths. So you can see here I have created this gradient that goes from -30 depth to -5 depth up this slope underwater. And if we turn on the natural resources layer, you can see the gradient here that is the abundance of fish. And if we just use our tooltip, sorry, I'll get rid of the terraforming tool there, we can see we have, when we have this, anything less than depth of -30, we get 10,000 fish population. And then as we work our way up the gradient, you can see the fish population decreasing all the way, and we're now around -15, we're getting under 4,000. -10, we're around 2,500. And as we get to -5, we're under 1,000. And it seems that anything that is maybe below 15 meters is good for a viable machine. And that should conclude this water simulation tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it and I answered all your questions. If not, leave one down in the comments. I appreciate you watching and I hope you learned something new. I think that ultimately this new water simulation will be good for new maps. I think it's a bit unfortunate for some older maps, especially rivers. It's a bit more challenging, but ultimately I think this is a positive step forward and the future is bright for map making in City Skylines 2. So thanks again for watching, take care, and goodbye.